What is happening, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back to review the Season 1 finale to The Legend of Vox Machina, which is now available on Amazon. If you have not yet seen episodes 10 through 12, go do so now because I will be going into spoilers. But what's not a spoiler is my feeling that this show has a very good chance of being the best goddamn adaptation of Dungeons & Dragons that we will ever see in film and television. I know that due to some licensing issues that Vox Machina is not one of the official D&D projects that Wizards of the Coast is furiously working on, and that there are plenty of other shows and movies cooking in the oven out there that have the D&D name, and I genuinely hope they will all be good. But if all those other shows and movies crash and burn, I can always enjoy The Legend of Vox Machina with a big giant smile on my face, especially with Amazon announcing a while back that Season 2 is definitely on its way. The epic, sometimes macabre, sometimes hilarious Briarwood story arc might have drawn to a close, but at the end of episode 12, we were left with one small cliffhanger as well as one huge juicy cliffhanger, and I'm beyond fired up to see where those storylines will lead in the future. So why do I say that this is the best D&D we will ever see on the screen? And who am I to make such an assertion? Well, I'm just one of millions of people who've invested countless hours into playing this game in its many forms and iterations over the last few decades. This year I started running a first edition campaign, and we just finished running the classic module, The Sinister Secret of Saltmarsh, in all of its old school glory. So while my preferred flavor and style of D&D might differ from others, I know this game inside and out. And what this show gets so right about Dungeons & Dragons is how it depicts the central characters in ways that 100% feels true to the way that so many players try to flesh out their characters in their games. The way the characters talk, the way they're motivated into action, how they balance their personal goals with the goals of the party overall. The writers and the cast just nailed it, which totally makes sense given how these voice actors have devoted a huge chunk of their lives into playing Dungeons & Dragons, turning their show Critical Role into a genuine online sensation. But what feels most authentic about the show is how casually the characters talk about sex and killing. Just like pretty much every D&D player I've ever met, this is not some cleaned up version that's been sanitized for the whole family. I totally embrace how the cast and crew of the show has chosen to depict this world. Anytime someone tries to make a show or a movie out of D&D, it's not enough just to tell a run-of-the-mill generic fantasy story. The project has to capture some of the gameplay, basically the distinct classes available to players within the game, as well as their unique skill sets. Rogues like Vax need to pick locks and search for traps, clerics like Pike need to turn undead, and barbarians like Grog need to try and kill every fucking thing in sight. But these details obviously have to be balanced with a compelling story, or what's the point of making a show in the first place? It's a really tricky balancing act that this show gets right over and over again. And I think what makes this balancing act work so well is that the show has so much heart. Not every bonding scene between the characters necessarily hits with the same equal impact, but when they do, I get nothing but chills. And like I said in my review for the season premiere, when I watched The Legend of Vox Machina, I basically start salivating at the prospect of my next gaming session, which is precisely what you want from a great D&D show or movie. The reverse scenario would be a generic viewing experience that fans would simply turn off because they'd rather be playing the game. What remains to be seen is if Wizards of the Coast, which is owned by Hasbro, will be able to compete with their own shows and movies, perhaps by adapting some of the classic novels set in their various campaign settings like The Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, Ravenloft, Dark Sun, etc. I've been hearing a lot of rumors about a live-action series based on the mini books starring everyone's favorite drow, Drizzt or Dritz. Anyway, I've never read those books, so you tell me how you pronounce this name, but as someone who's read a lot of the books in The Forgotten Realms, Dragonlance, and Dark Sun, I can tell you that the potential for all these fictional settings is off the charts. However, there's always the distinct possibility that someone will come along and totally screw them up. But with The Legend of Vox Machina, it's here. We already know it's good. We already have the great D&D show that we've always wanted. So Matt Mercer and his crew, they have officially beaten Wizards of the Coast to the punch, and now Hasbro's in the position of having to play catch-up. So let's get into a few of the specifics as to why I love this season so much. Of course, it had its ups and downs, with some episodes outshining others. Episodes 3 and 7 really stand out for me, but I need to revisit the entire season to rank them properly. But when this show is firing on all cylinders, it's just exhilarating. In particular, anytime we see this party of adventurers drawing upon their unique skill sets and working in unison as a team in order to overcome an obstacle that would otherwise kill them outright. A great example is in episode 10 when Scanlan is rocking out some heavy metal to give the party enough time to escape this acid bath, even if that plan ultimately includes Grog announcing that he's stripping down to his bare ass and then diving right in, and afterwards when he asked if Mr. Winky was still intact, I about rolled off my couch howling with laughter. But as great as the action can be, the heart and soul of the show is its characters. Whether they're talking shit or falling in love or just providing emotional support to one another, these characters are also clearly defined, and it's tough for me to decide which one I like the most. A strong contender is Laura Bailey as Vex. She's just so confident and cool and delivers so many great zingers. Like in the middle of a pitched battle when her brother starts professing his love for Caliph, Vex replies in her typical deadpan fashion, yes, yes, she's the tits. Her timing and delivery are just fantastic. And while I haven't followed Critical Role over the years, I couldn't resist going back and watching some highlights, and Laura Bailey seems to steal the show pretty consistently, in particular during this exchange with Grog, and I'll leave a link to the video in the description below.
No, I mean, I trust the others, right, but like, I know you on a more intimate level,
because you saw my titties.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's literally it. I don't think I ever had like an in-depth conversation.
So,
Now, if I were to offer one criticism, and it's very mild, it would be that this show frequently feels a little bit too much like a superhero show like Justice League Unlimited instead of a gnarly D&D show, but that's totally their call to make. As every player out there knows, each tabletop campaign is totally different. Each group of players has to decide with their dungeon master what kind of setting, style, and tone they wish to employ. And with this show, they're clearly going for high fantasy, particularly in the last 2 episodes where the climactic final battles definitely veered into superhero terrain, with the characters demonstrating almost godlike power when the moment calls for it. And this is totally understandable for the big climax of the season, but quick question for everyone out there. Did anyone actually worry for even a second that any of the central characters weren't going to make it? Throughout the season, we see secondary characters get eviscerated left and right, but I never worried about any of the key 7 characters, and without any threat of real danger, the emotional stakes of the show do take a small hit. My advice in season 2 would be to give one of the characters an epic death that'll be talked about for years to come, or at least more torture sequences like the one at the opening of episode 10. That one left a mark even on my jaded sensibilities, but I imagine they'll go back and follow one of the major plot lines from early seasons of Critical Role. So for all you superfans out there, you tell me, how often does Matt Mercer actually kill his players? It's something every dungeon master has to wrestle with, but my attitude is that your players get a much more satisfying feeling in the long run if they feel like there was a real possibility that they could have been totally wiped out at any time. So in closing, I'll offer one final word of praise. That opening title sequence continues to grow in me. Each time I see it, I get more and more giddy as I grow more and more attached to these characters, and for me, it's right up there with a lot of classic intros like the one for Thundercats. By the time season 2 rolls around, it's probably going to make me start bawling, so chalk me up as a vocal fan of this show. It's not often where I see a show or movie really get something right, something that's been important to me for a very long time. It's a rare, beautiful thing that I don't take for granted, so huge high five to all the writers, directors, and performers associated with the show. Can't wait to see where they take these characters in the future, but that's all I have. Hope you enjoyed this review. If so, remember to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon to be notified for future content. Thanks so much for watching, and more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.